Greetings. So, to start off with, I want to talk about the weather just really briefly. Orlando, who's watched every one of these videos so far, thank you a lot, has been trying to talk me into thinking about coming to Australia. I'm sorry, y'all got fires, your temperature's way too hot, you're like 14 to 18 hours of flight, ain't gonna happen. But I thought I'd share this with you. Right now, it is 10 degrees outside Fahrenheit, which means it's minus 12 Celsius. We got about 7 inches of snow over the course of basically 18 hours over the weekend. Come to me and let's talk about weather. And I have to bring up the weather first because Saturday night, my friend Scott and I decided to go to see William Shatner and The Wrath of Khan. And it's a very interesting thing because I've never gone to a thing where I watched a movie that I've seen multiple times and then listened to someone who starred in the movie. And what was interesting about it beforehand is that we were kind of in the middle of what they call a lake effect storm. We're about 35 miles away from Lake Ontario, and we're considered as being in the snow belt. And the snow belt basically means that we get more snow than a lot of other people because it comes off the lake. Now, I went to college at Oswego. This is Oswego State University, which is right on the lake. So no matter how much snow we get here, they get maybe 3 times more snow. They average about 350 to 360 inches of snow a year. Do what you will with that. Anyway, it was snowing really bad all day, and so I sent Scott a text and said, "Are we still going to do this?" He says, "Well, yeah, I'm driving." You know what? I'm good. You want to drive in that? That works fine. The lady next door, who comes to sit with my mother sometimes during the week, and usually on Saturdays in the afternoon for a few hours, said that she would come over and watch my mom and put her to bed so that I could go to this. So this was really cool, and it was also a Christmas gift my friend Scott gave me. Thank you to Scott. So we head out, and the roads are not really clear. Now that's different for our area, except for the fact that it was Saturday, because during the week, the roads would have been totally cleared. You might have had just a little bit of residual, but they weren't clear. However, they were driven, so there was like a path that the cars could go on. But we decided that we were going to take the safe route instead of getting on the superhighway, because you never know what's going to happen on the highway. We decided to take this, the safe route, which was basically to go through the village and then get on what we call the parkway. And even on the parkway, there was some guy who got his car wedged way up high, just coming the other direction, like toward our way. But his car was wedged up high, and it was after he had come under the railroad bridge. So it's like, how the devil could you have gotten there? And of course, the police were there. You would think that in a place that gets this kind of snow and ice and whatever, that people would know how to drive on it. But some folks think that that is the kind of thing for other people to deal with, not us. So anyway, we drive downtown Syracuse, and in my mind, even though I knew better, I kept thinking we were going to a totally different place. I don't know why. I thought we were going to what's called the Landmark Theater, and it was going to be shown on this gigantic screen, but that's not where we went. And I knew that as soon as he started to go to park. I said, "Oh yeah, that's right, we're not going to the Landmark. We're going to the On Center." He says, "Well, we're not going to the On Center." I said, "I thought you said we were going to the On Center." He says, "No, we're going to something Civic Center, because there's a county building that used to be called the Civic Center. It has like a theater in it, and I've been there multiple times. Matter of fact, the last time I'd been there, I got to see Porgy and Bess, because I happen to like opera. Yes, I do. Anyway, this time they were holding Wrath of Khan, and then William Shatner was going to be coming out later. So I've seen William Shatner once before. I had the hotel wrong, or the venue wrong. It turned out that we saw William Shatner in the early 90s when they used to still have Star Trek conventions or sci-fi conventions or whatever. And so they held one here in the Syracuse area. And it was William Shatner, Grace Lee Whitney, and Denise Crosby. I'm still trying to figure that one out. And there was someone else who I just can't remember who she is. She was on one season of one of those shows, and I just have been going blank. It's over 20 years ago. What am I supposed to do? At least I remembered everybody else. And of course, he was still a younger guy then, which sounds really weird, talking about a younger guy, but he's 87 now. So he was still in his 60s. But, you know, he was still kind of vibrant. And he put on a great talk. At that time, he didn't answer any stupid questions. And I had to say that because this is just how this is going to go. So we go in there. And usually I sit on the second level so that you can look down. We were on the floor, and I'm not really used to sitting on like the floor seats. There's the floor seats, there's the second level, then there's the third level. And then you have the box seats, and I've been in the box seats too, because I'm just bougie sometimes. But in this case, like I said, he paid for it, and it wasn't a bad seat. We had the end seats. We weren't in the middle, which is fine because you never know if you need to get out, and I kind of like to stretch my legs out a little bit more. And okay, I'm one of those people who would notice this. The place was filled with all kinds of folks who were wearing Star Trek stuff. I obviously was not. And there was only one other black guy there. So just two of us. And I'm thinking, where's the rest of you guys who like Star Trek? Only two of us. Now, here's one of the weird things that happened. All this is before everything got going. They had a table there of William Shatner stuff. Not Star Trek stuff, William Shatner stuff. And I knew that he had written some Star Trek books, so I assumed he was going to be selling some Star Trek books. No, I guess he's written 2 biographies, which I didn't know that he had written 2 biographies. And they were also selling his records. And some of you may not know this, but William Shatner has put out 5 or 6 albums over the years. And he's not a singer. He is a performance artist. And when you have a performance artist on a record, it basically means he gets a song and he talks through it. So I remember in college, first time I found out he had a record, and I put this thing on because I wanted to hear how he sang. And he did Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. You know Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds? The Beatles song. And then Elton John did it. Well, William Shatner, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. I'm serious. It was just like that. That's how his albums are. And he considered himself doing blues and jazz and pop, but this is his interpretation of it. And they were selling the albums for $25 each. And that sounds like a bunch of money until you realize that they were selling the books for $50 each, even though he had autographed them. You could have, if you could find the books in a bookstore, you probably could have got the books for like $10. But $50 because he signed them. And you see my thumbnail. The thumbnail basically said that if you wanted to pay an extra $125, now that you're here, you get to go to the VIP thing where you get to actually get to shake his hand and be in an exclusive room with him. Well, some people would have thought that just sounds wonderful, but I'm thinking, I ain't paying $125 extra for this. I mean, my friend Scott, he paid for this to get here. For both of us to go, that's $250. And I just can't imagine doing something like that. If it had been Michael Jackson back in the day, different story. Michael Jackson's the only one I would have ever paid that extra money for. But here you go. And there was this guy there who had bought one of the albums, and I guess he said something to my friend Scott first, who just walked off. So he says to me, "Oh, isn't this wonderful? I just bought this one." I said, "You did, huh?" "Yeah, I heard a couple of those in college, and boy, I gotta tell you, it really wasn't my cup of tea." Not realizing that this guy was a serious William Shatner music fan. It just never occurred to me. I just assumed that everyone thought it was some kind of joke. No. I depressed this poor guy. I feel so bad. What are you gonna do? So anyway, we go in and we sit down, and we're going to watch the movie Wrath of Khan. Like I said, when it first came out, I went the first day the movie came out. And I loved it. And I've loved it every single time I've watched it. What I didn't know is that there's an extended version of Wrath of Khan. Who knew that? Well, it turns out Scott did. He says, yeah, I knew there was an extended version. I said, how come we don't have that? He said, they never put it out for everyone else. I said, then how do you call that an extended version? So it explains certain things that happen that you're like, oh, so that explains it. For instance, I'm giving this away. If you've ever seen the movie and you see the scene after Khan has attacked the Enterprise and Scotty shows up and he's holding this kid in his arms, it turns out that kid is his nephew. He's 18 years old, so I know they didn't do the math well, but still, he's 18 years old and he's Scotty's nephew. So that's how come he's so close to the kid. And the kid at one point says something to Captain Kirk, you know, if I may be freak, and he just says this thing really fast and it's just really funny, and Kirk just kind of, okay, yeah, you know. I mean, really, this was just, I love extended version movies. And so them adding some of this stuff to it, I said, okay, you know what, this was good. And so the movie ends and people are standing up, and I didn't stand up for it. It's like, you know, y'all, this is like, you know, 30-year-old movie. We know what this is. When Shatner comes out, people start applauding. I didn't stand up. A few people stood up. It's like, yeah, let's see what he has to say. And I got to tell you, for an 87-year-old guy, he was actually very good. He was a very good speaker. He was very engaging. He was nice, because there's times when Shatner hasn't necessarily been known as being nice at events like this. But I think the venue is different. I think that because he's got, you know, a lot more years and he's done a lot more stuff, he's been through certain tragedies here and there, and he's just kind of mellowed out. But this is a guy who's done a lot. He's driven cars up to almost 200 miles an hour. He's got a rating for that. He's won equestrian trophies and different things like that. I mean, he's done a bunch of stuff. Now, I got to tell you the truth. I only know William Shatner from Star Trek. I know that he was on a show called T.J. Hooker. I know he was on a show called Boston Legal. Never saw him. I knew nothing about either of those shows. So a few of the questions that came up asked him about stuff like that, which I didn't know anything. But the funny thing is that he was telling stories, but he wasn't telling stories about the show. He was telling stories about things that happened backstage or other stuff that happened. And that helped to make it more fascinating. And so he was out there and he did it for an hour. And at the end of the hour, then we all stood up and gave him a standing ovation, because you just love to hear stories. I mean, this, like I said, this channel, at least I call it Mitch Mitchell Stories. Well, there's William Shatner stories, and William Shatner had a bunch of stories. For instance, he talked about Ricardo Montalban. I didn't know this. See, when the movie came out, Ricardo Montalban had these gigantic pecs. And I had read that they said they were real. That was really him. And he was an older guy. You know, he was older than William Shatner. Well, it turns out he had an accident. He'd fallen off his horse. And he was basically, you know, paralyzed from the waist down. So he, you know, he considered himself kind of athletic. So he just started pumping iron because he had to move himself around. So he had the big pecs and he had the arms. But if you go back and you watch Wrath of Khan, after you know that knowledge, you realize, you know what, they don't have a lot of scenes, almost none, where you see him actually walking all that much. And like I said, basically paralyzed. You know, he could get that little bit going, but he really couldn't walk. Most of the time, he was sitting down or in a wheelchair. It's like, wow. And near the end of the movie, when he's getting ready to set off Genesis, yeah, it's a spoiler. It's a 30-year-old spoiler. Get over it. Anyway, you see him crawling on the floor. And once you know the story, of course, you're now looking to see the legs, whatever. It's like, okay, well, there you go. So stuff like that you picked up on. He talked about him. He talked about Leonard Nimoy and William DeForest. He didn't talk about, I can't remember, Doohan, James Doohan. Didn't talk about him because obviously they didn't get along. Didn't talk about anyone else. Because, you know, he's had some issues with some of the people over the years. They've had issues with him. But it was just a lot of fun. And then it's time for us to come back home. Now, it got colder. I mentioned right now it's 10 degrees outside. This is days later. Well, it was colder that night. And it was still snowing. And the wind was still out. And there were a bunch of accidents on the road coming back. Luckily, not the road that we were on. we've got a kind of a highway, and on the highway, you just saw all kinds of police and ambulances and tow trucks and whatever. And it's a big deal because a couple years ago, the head basketball coach here actually killed someone accidentally because they had had an accident, and one of the people got out of the car and started to walk across, and he came to coach, and he couldn't see the guy, and even if he, had seen him, he couldn't have stopped because the guy walked out into a part of the street where there was just no stopping. So it's a dangerous area at times. But we went back. We did okay. We stopped at McDonald's on the way back. I had a fish sandwich. That was fun. And then, he brought me home, and then he cleaned off the lady next door's car because she drove over because she had actually come from something else. So instead of stopping at home, she just came to my house. And that was it. I thought it was really entertaining. Like I said, William Shatner was really engaging. And if I ever have the opportunity to see someone else who I think might have a whole bunch of good stories that would be interesting to hear, most probably an older person, I'm just going to tell it like it is, I hope to go see it again. Of course, now I'm sitting there trying to think, okay, what's left that I would want to sit through a movie for and then hear somebody. Maybe Will Smith. Who knows? Maybe even Martin Lawrence one day. Anyhow, that's my little tale here. William Shatner, Star Trek. There you go. My name's Mitch Mitchell. If you like stuff like this, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to, hit the notification bell so you get notified when I put these videos out. Doing one every day for 30 days here in January. Y'all take care. And Orlando, you keep trying to get me to come to Australia? Come to Syracuse, New York. Y'all take care.